What if there were words so silent that only a few heard them? Imagine for a second the scene: a quiet hill, the wind barely stirring, and a voice that doesn't break the air but touches the hearts of those who know how to listen. This is the idea behind the 7 whispers, prophetic fragments attributed to Mary, in accounts from Medjugorje that, though discreet, seem to carry an urgent call for inner conversion and the protection of families. Have you ever experienced this, that sudden feeling that something small and simple was actually saying a lot about your path? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you. We're not just talking about signs or apparitions mentioned in books, but guidance that calls for practical change, constant prayer, and a new perspective on what truly matters. Throughout this video, we will listen to each of these whispers as if they were letters sent through time, short, direct, and meaningful messages that, taken together, form a prophecy of care, warning, and hope. This is not a spectacle. When we speak of the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, we are trying to understand what these fragments say to the men and women of our time about repentance, about the renewing power of prayer and fasting, about subtle signs that precede great changes, and also about promises of healing and restoration. Some seek proof, others find fruit. Here, my proposal is to offer a reading that respects experience and helps you discern how to recognize a true sign, how to allow prophecy to transform daily attitudes, how to protect the home in the face of uncertainty. I will offer examples, symbols, and small practices for those who wish to experience this pathomicro ritual of prayer, a daily gesture of reconciliation, a simple act of fasting that can pave the way for inner clarity. Because listening to Mary's messages, in the context of these apparitions, is not just contemplating images, it is responding with actions that bear fruit. What if, in the silent words of these whispers, there is an inner map that prepares us for times of trial and, at the same time, shows us the way out through hope? Many pilgrims report experiences of change after implementing guidelines as simple as holding the day accountable with 5 minutes of silence, or blessing the door of their home as a way to protect family life. At the same time, caution is needed. Not every chill is a message, not every dream a warning. Discernment requires humility and criteria coherence with love, signs that produce fruits of peace and charity, and the ability to transform fear into liberating action. Throughout this video, we will carefully analyze each whisper, from the call to the most intimate conversion to the metaphor of the purifying fire, passing through the signs that appear as coincidences but can be much more. I invite you to view these fragments as a practical guide, not as a distant enigma, and to test, in small steps, what is compatible with your faith and the common good. If you're looking for quick answers, this isn't a call to easy conclusions. It's an invitation to listen with your heart and act with daily courage. Prepare yourself for stories, reflections, and clear suggestions that you can start implementing tomorrow. To understand these whispers, we must first return to the source. To understand these whispers, we must first return to the source. And before we continue, I want to invite you to actively join me on this journey. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what touched you most. Share an experience, an intuition, or even a question that arose while listening to these fragments. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. When you comment, others also feel encouraged to share their voices. And this is how we build a community that supports and enlightens one another. If this message awakens something in your heart, click like. It's a simple gesture that shows this topic matters and helps us produce more videos like this. And if you want to continue following reflections, testimonies, and practices about the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, subscribe to the channel. This way you'll receive future content and motivate us to delve deeper into each whisper with greater care and responsibility. Stay with me. Your presence here is not just a number, it is a sign that these silent voices are finding attentive ears. And now, with you by our side, let us follow the next whisper to understand what it wants to teach us and how we can respond in practice. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When we talk about discernment in the face of spiritual experiences, we're not just suggesting a set of cold rules. We're dealing with a human, sensitive, and practical process that requires presence, patience, and the courage to reevaluate one's mindset. Discerning isn't distrusting everything or believing everything. It's learning to listen carefully, to separate the noise from the revelations that have the potential to truly transform one's life. Therefore, let's look carefully at 3 practical signs that can guide anyone, whether a newly arrived pilgrim or someone experiencing a silent search at home, and that help distinguish a true whisper from a fleeting emotion. The first sign is silence. I'm not talking here about silence as simply the absence of sound, but as an inner space created to welcome a message. The silence that reveals usually appears after a prolonged pause of surrender and reflection. It's not an explosive insight that screams, but a gentle clarity that remains when the mental noise subsides. Practicing silence is not an esoteric ritual. It's a simple and accessible discipline. 5 minutes of conscious breathing in the morning, a brief reading session before bed, or a journal where you slowly write down what you've felt. If your intuition returns, persists, and bears the fruits of serenity, less anxiety, more peace, it's an indication that something greater is present. Silence, therefore, acts as a filter. If the message disappears as soon as you resume your agitation, perhaps it's just an emotion. If it persists and even germinates into concrete actions, it's worth investigating further. The second sign is spiritual fruit. In ancient texts and pastoral practice, fruit is often used to evaluate a charisma or an experience. When what has been received generates more compassion, more patience, more availability to others, there are signs of authenticity. Observe behavior and impact. Does the message provoke less pride and more humility? Does it lead to practical gestures of care, or just emotional conversations? True transformation has visible consequences in daily life: a decision to reconcile, a relationship, a change in a routine to include prayer, an act of generosity that previously seemed difficult. These are tangible signs. To test the fruit, a simple observation exercise is proposed for 21 or 30 days. Adopt a small practice inspired by the experience: 5 minutes of silence, a brief prayer before bedtime, a conscious act of kindness per week, and monitor whether there are real changes in your mindset and the decisions you make. If life begins to realign itself toward the common good, this is a strong indication that the experience has transformative value and is not just a momentary effect of emotion. The third sign is coherence with love and charity. No spiritual warning that leads to division, hatred, or the pursuit of personal power can be considered authentic within the canon of Christian love. Coherence is an ethical and practical criterion. Ask yourself, does this perception promote unity or fragmentation? Does it encourage attitudes of service and sacrifice, or does it exalt personal interests? Coherence also manifests itself in how the message dialogues with foundations that permeate respectable traditions, the call to humility, to care for others, to repentance that generates reconciliation. When a revelation encourages the opposite, one must be suspicious. Furthermore, coherence requires testing in the community, sharing with trusted people, with spiritual leaders or friends committed to goodness, and observing the reaction not only emotionally but also practically. Community discernment does not nullify personal experience, but adds a layer of verification that protects against deception and exaggeration. These three signs: silence, spiritual fruit, and coherence with love and charity work together, like a tripod that supports a balanced assessment. It's important that this assessment not become a constant judgment session. The invitation is rather to an experimental and responsible stance. Because there's a fundamental difference between testing and doubting. Testing opens a space for curiosity and commitment. Doubting can paralyze. Thus, I propose a practical and ritualized path of discernment that can be adopted as part of the journey. First, set aside regular times of silence to clear the mind. Second, implement small practices that can reveal behavioral fruits. Third, seek dialogue in environments that prioritize love, charity, and prudence. This sequence transforms discernment into habit, and habit is what truly changes mindsets over time. When discussing inner discipline, it's also worth bringing to light another often overlooked element: personal history and the underlying motivations. Not every intense emotion indicates falsehood. Often, a moment of fragility opens sensitivity and prepares the ground for receiving something genuine. Therefore, examining motivations is part of the process. Ask yourself honestly, am I seeking confirmation for something that suits me? Or am I open to transformation that may require sacrifice? Sometimes the hidden truth appears precisely where willpower is tested, in the choice between immediate comfort and a path of change that requires effort. Fundamental decisions are rarely instantaneous. They usually emerge from a sequence of small choices that, together, reshape a life. And whispers, in this sense, serve as constant reminders that guide these decisions. No grandiose measures with immediate effect, but consistent actions that, over time, produce real impact. It's also helpful to consider the role of revelations. In everyday life, they don't replace common sense or civil, financial, or family responsibility. The transformation we seek must coexist with daily tasks: paying bills, caring for children, working. The authentic message always finds a way to manifest within concrete reality, without requiring irresponsible escape. Therefore, part of discernment is verifying whether the proposed action can be integrated into routine in a practical and responsible way. And when the proposal requires more radical changes, prudence recommends planning and community support. The journey of transformation is always healthier when walked in company. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. As we embrace these criteria and begin to apply them, it becomes possible to identify patterns in the accounts we call whispers. Patterns that point to priorities, choices, and practices that, if adopted with humility, can alter the course of a life. These patterns will be the guiding thread for the next stage, where we will translate each whisper into practical, testable steps that anyone can begin to experience. If you recognized yourself in any of these internal movements or had an experience that influenced your life decisions, write the phrase that best sums up your feelings in the comments. Comment, "I'm on this journey too." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. The first whisper that many report in Medjugorje sounds like an urgent call to inner conversion, and when I say urgent, I don't mean anxious haste, but a gentle insistence that erodes resistance and demands a small-scale revolution, a change in mentality, a reordering of priorities, decisions that translate into habits. Imagine a breath that touches the soul, like rain on a parched earth. It arrives not as a storm, but as moisture that penetrates slowly, opening fissures where before there was only crust. This sensory image helps us understand the intimate nature of the summons. It is not a public order, it is a personal invitation to inner work that has a real impact on practical life. The conversion called for by the whispers does not promise an instant transformation or a spectacular miracle. Rather, it promises a journey of small, continuous adjustments that, together, change the direction of an existence, a journey that alters the course of daily choices. This calling begins in silence and manifests itself in simple acts. Many of the hidden revelations behind these accounts, the hidden truth revealed to those who pay attention, insist on something, are modern. Routine disregards coherence between faith and attitude. It's not enough to feel a shiver at an image or agree with beautiful words. Conversion implies, for example, choosing to renounce something that gives you immediate comfort but drains your inner peace. It's a series of small decisions, setting aside 5 minutes of silence before picking up the phone, choosing to forgive when pride dictates a reaction, setting aside time each day for a concrete act of service. These specific decisions shift mindsets and produce an impact that, though subtle, is profound. The transformation that arises from this exercise is both internal and practical. It alters relationships, improves financial decisions, reorganizes family priorities, and gives meaning to daily work. It's not an escape, it's the integration of spirituality into the fabric of real life. To make this tangible, I propose a simple daily step that serves as a gateway to conversion. Upon waking, before any external stimulus, take a deep breath and repeat for 2 minutes a clear intentions, something like today. I choose the truth that sets me free, followed by a concrete act that day, a phone call to someone in need, a request for forgiveness, an offer of help. This micro-ritual puts your mind in attention mode and creates a sequence of decisions that, over time, reshape priorities. Each day, repetition builds spiritual muscle. Each week, repetition bears fruit. Less irritability, greater clarity in choices, more compassion in interactions. It's not a magic formula. It's discipline applied to the soul. And the beauty of this method is its adaptability. It works for those living in a convent, those running a small business, those caring for children, or those traveling extensively. Transformation fits into routine, without requiring an irresponsible break from responsibilities. Throughout the testimonies circulating among pilgrims and researchers, there is one constant. The whisper calling for conversion often confronts what we call the spiritual comfort zone. This zone has many facades: fear of losing status, resistance to changes that require humility, attachment to practices that feed the ego. The whisper, with its insistent sweetness, invites us to abandon at least one of these facades. The process is always costly because it involves decisions that shape identities, accepting that it is necessary to ask for forgiveness, choosing to be transparent in a relationship where there were omissions, giving up a quick profit in favor of a fairer deal. These are decisions that have a concrete impact, not always immediately visible, but which create a movement of healing and coherence. True conversion transforms mindsets. The criterion ceases to be simply what protects me and becomes what edifies others. It's also important to understand that the call to conversion is not a defeat of reason, nor an invitation to emotional extremism. On the contrary, it requires lucidity, a sensible assessment of risks, planning, and often conversations with trusted people who know the inner workings of your life. Thus, inner movement goes hand in hand with prudence. When a change requires practical measures, reorganizing finances, seeking psychological support, communicating with family members, conversion demands responsibility. The spiritual dimension must meet civil and emotional responsibility. This balance is a source of maturity and avoids the typical drifts of impulsive decisions. Another essential aspect is the communal dimension of conversion. Even though it's often a whisper felt within, when it manifests authentically, it tends to produce communal fruits. A person who changes their way of acting influences the environment around them. More patience at home, more presence in the family, more acts of service in the neighborhood. Thus, the impact that seemed restricted to the individual reverberates. It helps build a network of care. Testimonies report that small gestures, initiated by an interchange, multiply and transform family and professional dynamics. This is the practical power of conversion. It is not limited to an internal state. It creates consequences that can be measured in the heart of a mother who finds peace, in a relationship that is rebuilt, or in a work decision made with renewed ethics. The conversion proposed by the whisper also emphasizes time. It's not about acceleration, but about setting life's rhythm to a new cadence. Instead of demanding large, immediate revolutions, the message encourages consistent, repeated steps. Small decisions, made daily, are the foundation of a new life. It's like planting a tree. You don't see the tall trunk in one day, but you tend the soil, water it, protect it, and gradually, the landscape changes. This planting metaphor helps us understand that conversion is a long-term endeavor, fueled by discipline and humility. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, as we recognize this first whisper as a call to change our mindset and make decisions that produce real transformation. We open the space to translate this invitation into concrete practices that can be tested and observed in our daily lives. It is at this point that revelations cease to be mere stories and become life paths, no longer just words to be admired, but tools for action. If you felt something touching you while listening to this, if some image, word, or memory caught your attention, reflect on a small step you can take tomorrow that translates this call into action. Comment, "This makes sense to me." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When the second whisper arrives, it usually touches the most intimate and visible space of our lives: the house, the family, the home, as a sanctuary. Don't think of it as just rituals or ready-made formulas. It is, rather, a call to transform routine into a healing environment, an invitation for daily decisions, no matter how small they seem, to reverberate in peace and coherence. The message is simple and profound at the same time. Home is not just a physical place where we live. It is the first arena where hidden truth becomes practical, where the mindset we cultivate within manifests itself in gestures, words, and small commitments. When we speak of protecting family and home, we are talking about measures that act both symbolically and concretely: family prayers, recurring blessings at the door, gestures of reconciliation that replace defensive routines. Imagine a scene, a home where the table was no longer a space for conversation, where silence was heavy and nervousness seemed to dominate meal. A certain family decides, almost at the urging of an inner breath, to try something new, gathering for 5 minutes in the evening to give thanks. Nothing grand, just a moment of mutual recognition. Over the weeks, the atmosphere changes discreetly. Looks soften, a harsh word is restrained, forgiveness emerges in response to a sincere request. This hypothetical example is no fantasy. Stories collected from pilgrims and from families who have adopted simple practices show that the repetition of effective and spiritual rituals produces a real impact. The home becomes a refuge once again, not just a shelter. The transformation occurs in a practical realm. Small decisions made with intention bear visible fruits in coexistence, patience, and the ability to listen to others. This is the kind of impact that scholars who analyze phenomena of faith call fruitand. That is why such a discreet call deserves attention. The practices suggested by the whispers, when applied with discernment, do not require radical sacrifices, but they do require consistency. Family prayer can be as simple as a time of silence before meals, a blessing at the door at the beginning of the week, or the reading of a short passage that sparks a topic of affectionate conversation. These gestures seem small, but they act as course correctors. They reorient decisions, repair habits, and create a new pattern of coexistence. This pattern alters the home's mentality from an environment of immediate responses to a space of presence and responsibility. And when priorities shift, the impact extends beyond the walls. External relationships, work, and financial decisions also begin to be evaluated with criteria that prioritize care and justice. The protection sought is not an isolated fortress. It is a posture that extends to the common good. However, there are some subtleties that deserve attention. Not every ritual practice is automatically meaningful. The gesture needs to be accompanied by intention and truth. A mechanical prayer, repeated without the heart's participation, is unlikely to bear fruit. Therefore, the whisper recommends authenticity. Blessing a home is not a talisman. It is an act that involves recognizing weaknesses and making commitments. When a family decides to bless their doors, it should be a time to discuss priorities, identify wounds that need healing, and make small, concrete decisions. Who calls whom? Who takes on what tasks? What boundaries will be respected to protect family time? In other words, the ritual is the beginning of a change in mindset. And this change in mindset is confirmed in the decisions that follow. The most impressive stories are those in which the home's transformation is the result of discipline and small sacrifices. A person who decides to reduce work time to be present at dinner. A couple who chooses to talk before bed instead of scrolling. Parents who establish a moment of silence before their children go to sleep to pray as a family. These gestures, though simple, require decisions and prioritization that imply sacrifice, and it is precisely there that the transformation becomes evident, not in the isolated gesture, but but in the committed repetition over time. And it is this practical nature that makes the message relevant to a modern audience. It does not call for an escape from life, but for the integration of spirituality with daily responsibilities. Furthermore, protecting the family also involves being mindful of communication and the narratives we allow within the home. Whispers often suggest that the language of the home be restorative, less destructive criticism, more recognition of efforts, fewer accusations, and more questions that seek understanding. The hidden truth here is that words shape decisions and identities. Repeated criticism can undermine self-esteem. A gesture of recognition can open doors to deeper conversations. Thus, protective practices include language exercises, learning to set limits without hurting, learning to express needs without carrying blame, learning to listen without immediately seeking defense. These skills have a direct impact on relationships and the building of trust. Another essential point is the inclusion of rituals that involve all members of the household, respecting their ages and circumstances. For children, a simple blessing before bed can be adapted as a gratitude story. For teenagers, creating space for non-judgmental dialogue is a powerful form of protection. The impact multiplies when everyone feels part of the caregiving journey, and when a family seriously practices this type of practice, they often notice effects in other areas. Better concentration at work, fewer distracting arguments, more thoughtful financial decisions, and a renewed sense of purpose that guides larger choices. Protection, therefore, is neither fantasy nor an empty promise. It is the result of strategic decisions and a collective commitment to transformation. It's about building an environment where revelations and whispers can be prudently tested, where spirituality isn't a sideline, but a force that shapes routines and priorities. And when this happens, the home ceases to be merely a space of conflict and becomes a laboratory of healing, a place where the spiritual journey finds practical application. Considering all this, it becomes clear that the protection demanded by whispers doesn't separate faith from responsibility. On the contrary, it unites conviction with action. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic. From home to spiritual discipline. This is the third whisper. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. When we reach the third whisper, we realize that this is not a distant mystical instruction, but a practical invitation to rediscover our inner rhythm, the renewed value of prayer and fasting. In many spiritual traditions, these elements appear as classic tools. In Medjugorje, according to accounts and testimonies, they return with a different weight, not as imposed rites, but as disciplines that promote clarity, protection, and transformation. Consistent prayer acts as a thread that aligns the mind, emotions, and decisions. Fasting, in turn, is a gesture that removes the excess so that the hidden truth can emerge. Together, these two articulators create a new mindset. They become practices that shape choices and impact the daily journey, rather than just sporadic moments of fervor. To understand the impact, think of prayer as a process of reprogramming attention. Modern life trains us to respond to constant notifications, emergencies, short pieces of content that demand immediate reaction. Sustained prayer, even if brief, creates a counter-rhythm. It refocuses, recognizes limits, and opens space to listen. I'm not talking about long, meaningless, repetitive prayers, but about intentional presence, a dialogue that improves decision-making capacity. People who adopt a basic prayer habit report greater clarity in their professional choices, less impulsiveness in emotional reactions, and a heightened sensitivity to the good of others. It's like tuning an instrument. The more in tune it is, the more harmonious the orchestra of life. This is the kind of transformation these accounts describe: gradual yet consistent changes in how a person acts and makes decisions. Fasting, in turn, works as a kind of noise reduction. By temporarily giving up something that occupies our time or pleasure, a meal, social media for a few hours, or a consumer habit, we create a space of lucidity. In practice, fasting is not just deprivation. It is a discipline of attention that reveals priorities and exposes patterns. When the mind is less easily distracted, subtle signals become more visible. In accounts from pilgrims who have experienced short fasts, many describe clearer nights of sleep, dreams that restore meaning to old decisions, and a sharper intuition about paths to follow. Thus, prayer and fasting function as a binomial that cleanses and illuminates. One calms and guides, the other unveils and strengthens the will. Both work synergistically to produce a real impact on practical life. It's important to emphasize that this isn't a proposal for extreme asceticism or a call for performative religiosity. On the contrary, what emerges in the stories coming from Medjugorje is a call for moderation and intention. The transformation the practice seeks to bring about is one of mentality, teaching people to prioritize what builds, to choose decisions that foster inner peace and responsibility toward others. Instead of grand, dramatic sacrifices, the whisper values consistent, purposeful renunciations and short, yet regular, prayers. This logic is compatible with families, workers, and business people. It adapts to everyday life without requiring an escape from life. The revelation lies precisely in finding ways to integrate these gestures into routine so that the impact is sustainable. To make all this tangible, I propose a 5-minute micro-ritual that anyone can try today. Upon waking, before checking your phone, sit for a minute in silence, breathing consciously. In the next 2 minutes, formulate a short, concrete prayer. It doesn't need to be theologically complex. Just a clear intention like, may I decide with love today, or may I see what I need to transform. In the final 2 minutes, do a short symbolic fast. Give up the first distraction of the day. It could be checking social media or a specific snack. And use this time to write down a simple action that fulfills the intention. A phone call. A message of reconciliation, avoiding an aggressive response at a pre-planned moment. This micro-ritual creates a chain of effects: attention, intention, renunciation, and action. It's not magical, it's practical. And when repeated with discipline, it changes your inner disposition and your ability to make decisions aligned with deeper principles. Many who have adopted similar practices report a kind of domino effect. A brief pause leads to a different choice. That choice alters a conversation. The conversation reconfigures a relationship, and the impact resonates in areas that previously seemed disconnected: work, child rearing, financial priorities. The transformation, in this sense, is not merely spiritual. It has concrete, measurable consequences in everyday life. This is why scholars who observe faith phenomena insist on evaluating not only emotional accounts, but also practical consequences. Attention shifts from the isolated experience to the pattern of change that develops over time. This is the difference between a fleeting emotion and a fruitful revelation. It's also worth remembering the behind-the-scenes nature of this process. Discipline doesn't come naturally to most. It requires training, adjustments, and sometimes company. Sharing the micro-ritual with a family member or trusted friend increases the chance of continuity. Small communities of practice serve as support and help translate intentions into concrete decisions. At the same time, it's healthy to maintain a critical and prudent eye. If a spiritual practice leads to isolation, pride, or irresponsible decisions, it's a sign that something is off track. The discernment we discussed earlier remains necessary: silence, fruitfulness, and coherence. Fasting and prayer, if authentic, generate peace and charity. If they generate division and self-promotion, they need to be revisited. There's also an aesthetic and symbolic aspect to fasting and prayer. Worth highlighting, they reintroduce meaning into everyday life, helping people realize that life is made of choices that shape character. By transforming a renunciation into an act of intention, the practice offers a narrative for life, a story of small decisions that add up to a trajectory of change. This is the beauty of the journey. One doesn't expect a single grand revelation that solves everything, but a series of steps that, together, chart a path to transformation. Each decision made with clarity reinforces the new mindset that the whisper proposes. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. As prayer and fasting sharpen perception and prepare the ground, subtle signs begin to appear that many people describe as precursors to larger changes. These signs are the focus of the fourth whisper. But it's not all comfort. The fourth whisper carries a warning. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When we talk about the subtle signs that precede major changes, we enter a territory where reality blends with sensitivity, where human routine encounters inflection points that, at first glance, seem insignificant and, yet, herald decisive shifts. These signs are not dramaturgy. They are small signs in everyday life that touch the heart, coincidences that persist, recurring dreams that return insistently, and that hard-to-name feeling, an inner urgency that doesn't fit into routine. The challenge is knowing when a thought is merely a fleeting echo of anxiety and when it is a warning worthy of heed. To help with this, we need to sharpen our perception without falling into credulity. Cultivate an observer's mindset and learn to read the clues responsibly. Let's start with the coincidences that touch the heart. There are common stories in which someone begins to repeatedly encounter a symbol, a song, a word, a chance encounter with a certain person, and then realizes that these signs have aligned with crucial decisions. The hidden truth in these situations isn't magic, but a kind of reorganization of attention. When a person is more sensitive, small repetitions gain meaning and act as triggers that push toward decisions that were previously postponed. Therefore, a coincidence that catches the eye once may be mere chance. The same coincidence that repeats itself in different forms, however, deserves to be recorded. Writing down these occurrences in a notebook: date, situation, feeling. You too see patterns that, in the heat of everyday life, would otherwise go unnoticed. This habit of recording is a practical and disciplined method for transforming intuition into data that guides choices with greater clarity. Recurring dreams are another warning signal that appears in many accounts. Dreams that return with slight variations often engage the imagination and emotional memory. offering symbols that speak to the soul through images and situations that reason cannot easily grasp. Dream interpretation is not automatic divination. It is rather a symbolic reading that engages with personal history. If a dream persists, it may signal an unresolved issue or a decision the psyche wants you to face. In the process of discernment we proposed earlier, the dream gains meaning when confronted with silence, spiritual fruit, and coherence with love and charity. A dream that incites pride or division is hardly a reliable guide. A dream that leads to repentance, reconciliation, or concrete actions that benefit others deserves care and practical reflection. The feeling of urgency deserves a chapter of its own. It can present itself as a tightness in the chest, restlessness at night, the impression that something needs to be done now, and often this feeling arises precisely when an important change is imminent. How can we distinguish legitimate urgency from panic? This is where the dimension of verification comes in. Authentic urgency is usually accompanied by signals that confirm its relevance, an internal resource that calls for action, and that, when prudently tested, bears fruit. For example, a feeling of urgency to restore a relationship can be validated if small actions resulting from it lead to real reconciliation. On the other hand, an urgency that only generates tension and confusion may indicate unresolved anxiety. The point is, always test, with controlled steps, without reckless leaps. A question that naturally arises is, how can we train this sensitivity without becoming hostage to signs and theories? The answer lies in a routine of simple practices, in the discipline that links perception to verification. By recording coincidences, writing down dreams, and testing small actions that stem from a sense of urgency, we create an empirical method of learning. Our mindset then shifts from superstition to a practical form of inner inquiry. We observe, act, and evaluate results. It's a process of inquiry that respects both the spiritual dimension and the concrete. Obligations of life. Decisions made based on these signs must always be compatible with family, professional, and civic responsibilities. Another important aspect is the role of narratives and emotional Often, a deeply moving sign is linked to unresolved trauma, a recent loss, or a change in cycle. When we can identify this context, the interpretation of the sign becomes more accurate. For example, a sequence of coincidences related to a name may point to someone from the past who needs reconciliation. Dreams about water may refer to a need for emotional purification. These contours help translate symbols into concrete decisions, to seek conversation, seek advice, adjust a life plan. Knowing how to read the undercurrents is, therefore, part of discernment. Understanding what lies behind the emotional symptom increases the likelihood of acting wisely. There are also external signals that don't come solely from within. Changes in social routine, unexpected encounters that open doors, news of an event that demands a response. These are alerts that appear in the realm of objective reality and demand a practical response. Here, the integration of inner sensitivity and rational evaluation is crucial. If something internal points to an action and the external environment provides a concrete opportunity, there is a window worth evaluating. The decision then is not made solely by feeling, but by a combination of elements: fine-tuned intuition, fact-checking, and the ability to plan the action responsibly. How can we recognize when it's just a thought and when it's a warning? A practical approach suggested by studies and testimonies is to apply the triangle of discernment we've already discussed. Silence to tune the mind, observation of the fruits of actions, and verification of coherence with love and charity. If the thought stands the test, remains, after silence, generates actions that produce good and don't divide it, gains credibility. If, on the contrary, it evaporates over time, bears no fruit, or leads to self-glorification, it needs to be discarded or re-evaluated. This practice transforms impulsiveness into a process, intuition into a decision-making tool. The journey of recognizing signs also requires humility. Some perceptions are flawed, some signs prove misleading, and it is part of the human experience to learn from these mistakes. What distinguishes those who grow in this sensitivity is the habit of correcting course, seeking advice, and observing impacts. Thus, the hidden truth is not something revealed all at once. It is a progressive discovery that requires discipline, courage to make small decisions, and patience to see the results. Real transformation comes when a person integrates this learning into their daily mindset and the decisions that shape their lives. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic. By recognizing patterns and signs responsibly, we open the door to what comes next, not just understanding warnings, but translating each clue into practices that strengthen character and reorient life. The fifth whisper enters the inner forge. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. The image of fire that appears in the stories doesn't come as an empty threat, but as a living metaphor for pure, wanton destruction, but a forge that transforms what is useless into seed. When we think of fire, our immediate reaction might be fear, a fire that burns, that consumes. But in the whispers, this flame has another face. It touches what is hardened, ignites what impedes growth, and, in the end, leaves more fertile soil for something new to be born. It's a powerful symbolic language because it speaks directly to the human experience of loss, losing a project that went wrong, seeing a relationship crumble, facing a loss that hurts body and soul. In these passages, the hidden truth of the whisper is that loss, if experienced meaningfully, can become nourishing, and it is precisely this possibility that instigates transformation. In practical terms, the fire metaphor calls for a reevaluation of how we deal with suffering. Instead of trying to seal the wound with justifications or rationalizations that keep the problem intact, the proposal is to embrace the process, identifying what needs to die so that the new can find space. These are painful decisions. Yes, perhaps giving up a financial routine that sustains the ego, perhaps saying no to a project that eats away at family time, perhaps recognizing that certain expectations cultivated for years no longer serve life. These decisions directly impact mindset. Transformation begins to be seen not as a loss of identity, but as alignment with a deeper truth that demands coherence between action and purpose. There is, however, a fine line between purification and self-destruction. Therefore, the whisper of fire is not a call to irrational sacrifice. It is an invitation to responsible discernment. The forge that transforms acts carefully. It burns only what is useless, preserving the seeds. To walk this process without losing oneself, a set of practical attitudes is necessary, combining courage and prudence. First, recognize areas of attachment. What routines, habits, or decisions sustain a self-image but deplete peace? Second, map out small, possible sacrifices. What losses don't jeopardize the essentials: food, basic affection, the well-being of dependence but create space for a new order of priorities. Third, plan these cuts with a support network. Talk to trusted people, prepare practical alternatives, and articulate decisions that don't generate unnecessary ruin. For those seeking an exercise that helps them accept difficult changes without despair, I propose a guided reflection that serves as emotional and rational preparation. Find a quiet place, breathe deeply for 3 cycles, and imagine an ancient bonfire, not a wild blaze, but a controlled flame that warms and summons. Bring to mind an element of your life that needs to be let go. It could be a habit, a consumer, relationship, or an emotional project that didn't thrive. Observe without judgment why this element exists. What fears sustained it? What apparent benefits did it offer? Then ask yourself, what good would remain if I let it go? What doors could open? Write down 3 possible scenarios for the next 6 months, considering practical consequences and mitigation alternatives. Finally, choose a small, measurable, and reversible step to take tomorrow. Call someone. Redefine a routine. Donate something that takes up space, and action that symbolizes surrender while maintaining accountability. This exercise combines emotion and planning, 2 dimensions that must work together to prevent purification from becoming a crisis. The emotional dimension opens the door to accepting loss. Planning ensures that the decision is prudent and productive. In the accounts of many families and individuals who have undergone renewal processes, these combined gestures have had a profound impact. Initial fear gave way to clarity that guided subsequent decisions, results that altered everything from family dynamics to professional choices. Transformation, therefore, is not a leap in the dark, but a sequence of calibrated decisions that, with time and discipline, change the landscape of life. Along this inner forge, an ambivalent feeling often emerges. Pain and hope intertwined. Recognizing this ambivalence is part of the healing process. There is no contradiction in suffering and, at the same time, envisioning a different future. The metaphor of fire helps here because it teaches us that the burn is temporary and that, after the heat, the soil may be more apt to receive seeds. It is an invitation to accept that some cuts will hurt and that the impact of this pain can be transformative if navigated with care and purpose. The mindset that emerges from this path is not that of a lone hero, but of someone who learns to coordinate small decisions to make a lasting impact on their own life and the lives of those around them. In practical terms, the changes generated by the forging of whispers manifest themselves in concrete decisions: reorganizing time, prioritizing relationships, reducing consumption, investing in training that gives meaning to one's vocation. Behind the scenes of these choices often involve difficult conversations, budget adjustments, and an effort at emotional re-education, learning to find pleasure in things that aren't immediate, redefining ambitions, and rebuilding a routine around what nourishes. This work demands discipline, because transforming habits requires repetition. But with each small, faithful gesture, confidence grows, and the impact is felt in various areas: mental health, quality of relationships, clarity in professional decisions, and a renewed sense of personal mission. It's equally important not to romanticize the process. Not every loss guarantees an automatic gain. Not every renunciation is a seed. Therefore, testing and observation are essential practices. The forge isn't magic, it's pedagogical. one learns from mistakes, corrects the course, and continues on the path with humility. In many accounts, those who persevered didn't find an instant happy ending, but a series of discrete advances that, together, reshaped their lives. The hope that emerges in this context has a practical face. It is built day after day, through decisions consistent with rediscovered values. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When the inner forge begins to operate, seeds appear that demand cultivation, and the fifth whisper transforms into action, accepting the test and sowing the promise. After the test comes the promise. The sixth whisper reveals this. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. After going through trials and inner forges, the reports coming from many people touched by these experiences of faith begin to speak not only of warnings, but of promises. And this is where the sixth whisper takes on a face of concrete hope. It's not a vague promise, like someone promising easy luck. It's consistent accounts of restoration, inner healings that released years of resentment, reconciliations that re-established seemingly irreparable bonds, and the discovery of a new purpose that gave meaning to professional and emotional decisions. In many testimonies, transformation appeared as a side effect of persevering choices. Someone who, after months of prayer and small sacrifices, found peace again after a bout of depression. A couple who, after accepting to renounce pride, rebuilt their trust. A worker who changed priorities and rediscovered a vocation that made their work more human and less mechanical. These accounts are not melodrama. They are stories of real impact, of palpable changes in mindset and decision-making, which show how a hidden truth, when embraced with humility, can open up previously unthinkable paths. The hope that springs from these whispers is not passive. It is an active hope, demanding a response in small, repeated actions, and that's precisely why it makes sense to discuss a concrete practice to strengthen this hope. Deliberate gratitude. Gratitude isn't just a nice feeling, it's a discipline that rewires the brain, reshapes priorities, and alters the internal narrative we hold about ourselves and the world. When someone begins to anchor the day in 3 things they're grateful for, even the simplest, like a warm loaf of bread, a phone call from a friend, or a moment of silence that brought relief, this practice works as an antidote to hopelessness. In practical terms, gratitude changes decisions. More grateful people tend to prioritize relationships, less likely to make choices that sacrifice the common good for immediate gains. Transformation, therefore, takes on an everyday face when gratitude guides economic, emotional, and professional choices. There's a symbolic dimension to these promises that's important to remember. The idea of healing doesn't eliminate the need for responsibility, nor does it automatically transform all wounds into miracles. The promise suggested by the whispers acts more like a horizon-oriented approach. If you care for the soil of your life habits, relationships, spiritual practices, you're more likely to see the fruits of restoration blossom. It's a kind of inner ecology. Planting well, caring for, watering, and protecting creates the conditions for the promise to be fulfilled. This requires practical decisions, from seeking professional help when needed, to resuming commitments to family care, adjusting work routines to allow for presence, and cultivating restorative conversations. The promise doesn't replace action, it guides and inspires it with meaning. The impact of these promises also manifests itself at the community level. In accounts gathered from prayer circles and among pilgrims, the restoration of one person often triggered a chain of effects. A gesture of forgiveness liberated another. A family reconciliation spawned a new tradition that strengthened bonds. A rediscovered purpose led to service initiatives that benefited neighbors and friends. This multiplier effect is one reason why many scholars draw attention to the social fruit of religious experiences. When individual transformation translates into actions that promote justice, mercy, and service, the impact extends beyond the inner circle and touches the community. Hope, then, is not an individual illusion, but a dynamism that can reconfigure environments and produce collective well-being. For those seeking something concrete and testable, I propose a gratitude exercise that is both practical and mindset. Every night, write in a notebook 3 events from the day for which you are grateful, briefly describing why each was significant and how it can guide a decision for the following day. This gesture creates an emotional and practical map. When you review the week after 7 days, you will begin to see patterns and priorities emerging, and therein lies the conversion of gratitude into decision. Perhaps you realize that mornings with your children are more decisive for your peace than extra hours of work. Perhaps you notice that small acts of kindness have returned emotional security. This kind of observation is not mysticism. It is a method of transformation based on personal data, what your own history reveals about what truly nourishes you. The practice of gratitude also plays an important role in maintaining hope in the face of setbacks. Transformation is rarely linear. There are advances and setbacks. It's natural that, at times, hope may seem tenuous. In these moments, reviewing the notebook of small blessings serves as a reminder that progress has been made and that the journey is consistent. Furthermore, gratitude helps shape our mindset, instead of an expectation of immediate perfection. It establishes a long-term vision, where everyday decisions are recognized as seeds planted for the future. This mindset shift is essential, so that the promise of whispered messages doesn't turn into frustration, but remains a guiding light for choices. The behind-the-scenes story of this renewal also shows that hope and prudence go hand in hand. Many stories of healing and reconciliation were the result of processes that combined prayer, dialogue, and other forms of practical intervention therapy, counseling, contractual adjustments at work, and changes in habits. The promise doesn't replace the work of reconstruction, it accompanies and nourishes it. Therefore, when someone dreams of restoration, it's important to map out concrete steps and seek support. The promise inspires, but execution requires organization, courage to make difficult decisions, and patience to see the effects over time. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. As hope grows stronger through practices of gratitude and value-aligned decisions, signs emerge that a broader purpose is emerging, a meaning that gives direction to choices and gives meaning to trials endured. This is the moment when the promise ceases to be merely inner comfort and becomes motivation for actions that translate into service and mission. Finally, the seventh whisper translates everything into action. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. The seventh whisper is not a solitary conclusion. It is a practical map that translates all the previous revelations into daily steps. It is the everyday manual for living the calling. After listening to the voice of silence, testing signs, accepting trials, and nurturing hope, it is time to establish a coherent routine. Simple spiritual habits that shape mindsets, decisions that protect relationships, practical care for others, and collective discernment that avoids dangerous shortcuts. This step is essential because true transformation is not born from spectacular insights. It is born from small repetitions, guided choices, and a support network that maintains direction when the temptation to backtrack appears. Thinking of Whisper 7 as an action plan is understanding that revelations only become consolidated when they transform our way of life, and that is what I want to show now, with clarity and applicable practices tomorrow. First, spiritual habits anchored in simplicity. Instead of unrealistic goals, choose practices you can accomplish even on your busiest days. A practical example: 3 times a day, at predefined times upon waking, at lunch, and before bed, breathe consciously for 1 minute and formulate a short intention that connects your mind to purpose. May I see with compassion. May I decide wisely. May I do what matters today. These micro-habits reprogram attention and help align decisions throughout the day. Also include a longer weekly practice of silence, 20 minutes on Sunday. For example, to evaluate the week, recognize fruits, and adjust choices. Repetition builds spiritual muscle. Discipline transforms momentum into direction. Second, care for others as a decision-making criterion. Whisper 7 insists that the true test of conversion is how we treat those around us. Make care a practical policy. Establish at least one concrete gesture per week that benefits someone close to you. A call to a distant relative, practical help to a neighbor, time dedicated to listening without offering immediate solutions. These actions not only translate faith into action, but also shape the mindset for more just and humane decisions. The impact is revealed in less selfishness, more patience, and relationships that sustain the journey through difficult times. Third, community and collective discernment. No one should walk alone on a path of profound change. Find or form a small circle of trust, or for people who can be your checkpoint where you share insights, decisions, and results. This circle serves 2 practical functions. It offers honest feedback and helps calibrate the interpretation of whispers. Hidden truth, when tested in community, gains protection against exaggeration and manipulation, and at the same time, finds support for riskier actions that require networking. Plan monthly meetings, which can be virtual, to review progress, adjust habits, and celebrate achievements. The community structure amplifies the impact. Fourth, concrete routines for the next day. There's no need to reinvent your life. You need to rearrange small pieces so that the new becomes a pattern. Tomorrow, for example, try the following practical script. When you wake up, breathe, and write down your intention for the day. Throughout the morning, perform a caring action, a message, an offer of help, a word of recognition. In the afternoon, dedicate 15 minutes to deliberate silence and note any signs or insights. In the evening, record a small gratitude and a resolution for the next day. This cycle completes a circuit: intention, action, observation, gratitude that repeated alters how you make decisions and where you place your energy. The logic is simple: informed intention, aligned action, honest assessment, course correction. Fifth, emotional and financial discipline. Change isn't just spiritual, it requires practical organization. Set aside time to talk to those who matter, protect family time, and evaluate expenses that drain peace. A financial decision consistent with the whisper can be as transformative as a prolonged prayer, reducing overtime that robs you of time at home, redirecting investments to meaningful projects, prioritizing resources for training that strengthens your mission. Small economic decisions, combined, reshape priorities and allow for freer choices. Transformation has a material impact. When the mind aligns with values, the wallet also begins to indicate new paths. Sixth, evaluation and correction rituals. Every week, set aside a moment to review not only what worked, but what required adjustments. Use 3 practical questions. What produced peace this week? What took me away from my purpose? What simple decision can I make to correct the course? Writing down the answers transforms intuitions into concrete actions. The habit of reviewing prevents the journey from becoming improvisational. It creates a method of continuous improvement that brings robustness to the transformation. 7th, integrate compassion into difficult decisions. When a daunting choice arises, changing jobs, confronting a relationship, adjusting family plans, apply a practical criterion, impact on the common good. Before deciding, imagine the scenario a year from now and ask, will this decision enhance the peace and dignity of those involved? If the answer tends to be yes, even at personal cost, the choice is likely aligned with the prompt. The hidden truth guiding these decisions is that caring for others does not impoverish life. It enriches it with meaning. 8th, small spiritual practices to cultivate resilience. When the going gets tough, simple refreshers help sustain the mind. Reading short texts that nurture courage, songs that soothe, physical movements like walking that unblock thoughts. Discipline isn't austere. It's creative and adaptable, designed to keep you ready for the demands of change. 9th, celebrate the signs and small fruits. The journey requires joy. Acknowledge progress, no matter how small. This isn't complacency. It's recognizing that transformation is built in moments. Intentional celebrations strengthen the mindset and encourage continuity. 10th, translate revelations into concrete mission. By aligning habits, care, and community, you begin to realize where your calling finds practice. Perhaps it's caring for children, perhaps listening to the elderly, perhaps organizing a small support group. The 7th whisper invites you to convert experiences into service, not for fame, but as a natural consequence of a recalibrated life. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. If these are the whispers, what will be your first step? Think of an action you can start tomorrow that is small, realistic, and measurable. When choosing, remember, transformation is built on discipline and companionship, on decisions that resonate beyond you and make an impact. Comment, this message was for me. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking with me through these words. If something touched your heart, leave the phrase, I'm with you until the end, in the comments, or write this message was for me, so I know we're truly connected. If this content brought clarity or provoked any reflection, please leave a like. It's a simple gesture that shows it's worth producing more videos like this and helps me continue to bring you material with depth and responsibility. If you want to follow the next reflections and testimonies to come, subscribe to the channel. I promise content that will help you on your journey, with practices and stories that can truly transform decisions and mindsets. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click and stay with me there to hear stories from those who have experienced these whispers firsthand. Thank you for being here, where presence makes all the difference.